crazy story of GIGOBYTE in Yu-Gi-Oh! GIGOBYTE was a small reptilian creature who was a leader of a group called the Normal, which was full of low-level normal monsters that didn't win many fights, but they did never give up, a trait that GIGOBYTE would always carry. Now, at some point, GIGOBYTE would be captured by Eri, the water charmer, who trained it as one of her two familiars. And under Eri's watch, GIGOBYTE would start to mature and become stronger, now being known as GIGOBYTE. Now, despite spending most of its young life with Eri, GIGOBYTE would eventually become unpossessed and leave Eri, beginning his own journey, which is why in future cards, Eri can now only be seen with her fish monster, not GIGOBYTE. Now let's talk about a really weird card that has a lot to do with this story called the Marmonting Captain. In this card, we see three major characters. The first is the Marauding Captain. In the background is Freed, who right now is known as the Brave Wanderer. And in the background, we see a hungry GIGOBYTE looking at this food. At this point, it's implied that GIGOBYTE would attack in an attempt to get some of that food because it's very hungry. And despite having more attack points than Freed, who stepped up to fight him, Freed was a lot more clever than GIGOBYTE, so during their fight, he used a magical device to open up a dimensional prison, sealing GIGOBYTE in the different dimension, which in the actual game is the Banish Zone. Now, at this point, if you're thinking, that's a little extreme, you didn't have to send GIGOBYTE to an alternate dimension just because he wanted some food. Well, the Marauding Captain actually thought the same thing. So as GIGOBYTE now stumbled through the different dimension, the Marauding Captain chased after him in an attempt to save him. But this would turn out to be a pretty bad thing because they would end up running into one of the many rulers in the different dimension known as the Invader of Darkness, who at some point would capture GIGOBYTE as well as the Marauding Captain, as he planned on using GIGOBYTE for some sort of sacrifice. And to accomplish this, he enlisted the help of a burning fiend, known as the Blazing Inpachi, who as a side note just used to be known as Inpachi, and was at one point defeated by Marauding Captain, so that's why he's so down to attack the duo. Now, during the battle that we can see on the card two-man cell battle, Blazing Inpachi would actually get the upper hand, and as it launched a fireball at GIGOBYTE, Marauding Captain would actually use his body as a shield, saving his life. And this inspired GIGOBYTE to attack Inpachi, who he defeated, turning into the Charcoal Inpachi. But with Inpachi defeated, there's still the Invader of Darkness to deal with, who fired a blast towards the duo. However, this time it was GIGOBYTE who stepped up to help the Marauding Captain, now using his body as a shield. And while GIGOBYTE would perish from this attack, his carcass was then discovered by Kozaki, the underworld scientist who infused it with cybernetic enhancements, turning him into GIGOBYTE, who proved too powerful for Kozaki to contain, so he shot him out of the compulsory evacuation device, where at some point he would again run into Freed, who's now known as the Matchless General. And now that GIGOBYTE is an insane cybernetic rage machine, you would think Freed would be outmatched. However, Freed once again proved that where he lacked in strength, he made up for in cunning, using devices like the Draining Shield to drain GIGOBYTE's power, before striking a counterblow. But GIGOBYTE would not be defeated, as he now filled with anger, transforming into GIGOBYTE, his final form. And in this form, he's now strong enough to easily defeat Freed, but before he could deal the final blow, the Marauding Captain appeared and urged him to stop. And recognizing his friend who saved his life, GIGOBYTE would actually calm down, now pledging his life to the side of good and being known as GIGOBYTE the Risen, who was then instantly pulled through another dimensional barrier by Swordbreaker, and the two are now fighting in outer space. The end.